Yes. Hello, Neil. We're live. That's Wai's catchphrase. It's been a month. I've been trying to come up with my own signature introduction for these wellness policy episodes. Hey, by the way, episode 20. Thanks for joining us, people. Live or on YouTube or in your podcast app of choice. I think I might go with an intro of like, hello.
That works. Hello, Jordan.
Okay, good. Hello. Okay, so now we're in. We've officially started episode 20, the wellness policy. Okay, and also at the start, I got to lean into the camera. There we go. And then I've noticed listening to podcasts, often when you have a co-host, Neil, after the greeting, the host will often ask the co-host, so, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Jordan. And here, what about this? I sometimes forget, because this is a monthly podcast and you and I speak outside of the confines of this, that there are listeners and viewers who only get their helping of Jordan Goodman once a month or every 4 weeks or so. So there's going to be people perhaps wondering about 2 episodes ago and the Bummer Summer. How is Jordan on the 22nd of September?
Well, that's very considerate, Neil. I'm okay. I mean, not really. That's actually a fucking lie. I'm not okay. I just made another doctor's appointment this morning. Am I better than... I think I'm better than 2 months ago.
Yeah.
But not significantly better. So perhaps that's an issue, but I have talked to more than one doctor who is under the assumption that what I have is not long COVID, but I'm just recovering from a very intense bout of COVID with a severe inflammatory reaction to the illness. So that makes me feel better. And I guess however I'm thinking about what I'm navigating, that significantly affects the outcome, I believe. Is there a transition to the career? I think so. In the sense that, look, this is a terrible pivot, but I'm going to do it nonetheless. Like, we're talking about career today, by the way, if you haven't seen the thumbnail or read the title yet. And we're glad you're here. So thank you for being here, anyone watching or listening. Much of life is what we think about it, if that was articulate. That sounded odd, and perhaps so. But we read, for reference, this book, Linchpin, by one Seth Godin. This is not a book review, so if that scares you away, it's okay. But we're just using it as some inspiration and some reference points for a broader conversation about the nature of navigating career. And Neil, when this book came to me, when it came out about 12 years ago, it was like the book I always wish was written. It felt like it was written for me, in a sense, in the sense that Seth Godin offered me new ways of thinking about my life, about the world more generally, about the nature and trajectory of career and the potential and possibility of all that. And that's the great thing about books. It's having different perspectives and experiences and worldviews, often, at least in the case of this book, that is not typical or of the norm, that either made me feel less alone or just gave me new ways of thinking about the rest of my life, career related, that just gave me more hope and possibility, and even a blueprint that I've used successfully numerous times over the past 12 years. And if we can just jump right into it, what I mean by him maybe offering something novel in his ideas about thinking about career is that we have a lot to contend with. We've got like a century worth of narratives to contend with, at least in my country. I'd assume the same for you, especially when it comes to our education systems and the way in which they've been intimately designed for a work reality, like post-industrial kind of mid-century factory type work, where you show up at a certain time, and everyone is like facing forward, and you're taught to a test, and everything is done by spec, and you're graded in very concrete ways, and you speak when you're spoken to, etc. And I don't know, like, I'm wondering for you, Neal, maybe reading the beginning of this book, how did it land for you? Obviously, it's landing for you you're in a different place with your career than I was at the start of my graduate education. But I'm just wondering, like, how this all landed for you, because it changed my life significantly.
Well, first of all, the author was someone that you turned me on to through his blog and his email letters. And that's what I didn't know, that he was such a prolific author. I think he's written maybe 16 books or something. This is one of his most popular. But anyway, to get back to the point, the opening of the book really gets into that, which is this sort of, we're still conditioned for the 9-to-5 sort of factory existence, where the boss really ideally wants compliant, replaceable labor. And he goes as far as to sort of say that that's the system we're still dealing with, really, as far as, in school, you're taught to, obey the rules. You learn your little sort of subjects in a little box. You're not really taught some of the skills that make you much more successful in the working sphere. So all of that certainly did land. I'm in a different place, not a grad student, but someone who's worked really for the same employer now for almost 20 years and enjoys it. So I was able to relate to almost the experience of friends and family more than myself. My workplace is somewhere where you do have the ability to be a little more flexible. Yes, it has an HR department and a staff handbook and things like that with their policies. But at the same time, no 2 days are the same. And you do have the opportunity to be creative. I mean, and that's what Seth Godin isn't shy about, talking about creating art. And he doesn't mean painting a picture or writing a song. He's quite explicitly saying that you can bring these principles to the job that you've already got. You don't have to jack it all in and kind of find your passion. In fact, sort of, it's the opposite. Bring your passion through the work that you do. But yes, that opening certainly made me think about the way things are set up. I have nieces and nephews that are still at school, and they're not being taught things like time management and logistics and some of the what people call soft skills, the people skills, the interaction with others. It's still the case that people, have a first lesson is French history, then geography, then it's lunch break, then it's reset. All of that kind of thing is still the way the school system is set up. So we're conditioned from early on for that kind of work day, if you like.
Yeah, I've seen, Seth will pontificate on especially the nature of education and the usefulness of education in many other mediums, namely his daily emails or blog that he sends out. And I've seen him be incredibly succinct by saying the function of education perhaps could be teaching people how to lead and how to solve interesting problems. Mm-hmm. And really interesting is subjective. But I think that's at the heart of this book. It's this idea of bringing our own humanity to to our careers and bringing our own humanity to the work that we do day in and day out, whether we're getting paid for it or not. And a lot of it comes down to our own sense of self and self-awareness and understanding what is interesting or not to us. But before we get there, I think we all need to feel a sense of permission that navigating something as significant as something like a career, if we take into account all the time and energy and investment that it becomes our life, like feeling as if we have permission to do something that's more interesting to us, feeling like we have permission to try a different way. Because most people, at least that I was around, and I still feel like this is the case with people that I know or work with, and etc., of people want to be given the handbook. People want to be given the map. Here's the steps. And if you follow the steps, if you quote unquote do good, if you are taught to the test and you get the right grade in the right way in which we're directing you, then everything will be okay. Right? So I know a lot of people that I grew up with that, of course, they're going to go to university, and then they may go to graduate school, and they do this, and they follow the directions or the suggestions of all the professors. And then once you finish your education, the job is right there. Or perhaps you go into this type of internship, and then the internship will lead into a job. And then once you get an entry-level position, then you can just work your way up, and you'll have enough income to have children and a mortgage and retirement. And then if you do that for, 50 years or so, you will retire with a gold watch and dignity and enough savings to never have to worry about income again. And last century, we kind of called that the American dream, or that was a version of the American dream. And for a lot of people, that kind of worked. You could work at the factory, or even more of like let's call it a white collar job, still a factory mindset in that we are sitting at our desk and our computer, and we're just following the script. Right? Like you're a salesperson, you have the script, or whatever job, you just follow the guidebook or the manual. There's many problems with that, though. One, like there's been multiple recessions, at least in my lifetime, some more significant than others. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that, that job security thing and that loyalty to the employee, maybe that's not as secure as we were led to believe last century. Also with that, we're not taking into account like how we show up in our daily lives. Like, are we just simply going through the motions to get through it? Or are we actually living our life and bringing our humanity, bringing our interests, bringing our personality, and our desires to the experience? And Seth Godin would argue that if we can develop the capacity to do this with consistency, then perhaps we end up not becoming replaceable. And the subtitle to the book is "Are You Indispensable?" That's the adjective he uses. Being indispensable, because if you look at a lot of companies, whether it's a Walmart and then followed by an Amazon, like infiltrating retail at every local level, well, then it just becomes a race to the bottom, meaning how can we get more cheap, and how can we do this quicker? And ultimately that often leads to how can we do this in a way that's less personal? And when we get caught up in a race to the bottom, like we cannot compete. I don't know about you, Neal, but like I can't fucking compete with Amazon when it comes to price and speed. But I also know that Amazon can't compete with me when it comes to the things that make me unique in the world. And essentially these kind of themes that we're sketching right now is the heart of this book. To maybe back up and to be a bit broad, I'm curious for you, Neal, at what point did you start thinking about what am I going to do for a living? How am I going to make money? I guess I'm just curious, like how you conceptualize that.
Okay. Quite late by most standards, I would say. Although in my peer group of friends, this was reasonably normal. The paradigm was do well in school, which is academic achievement. At the time I was at school and in the sort of part of society, whatever you would want to describe it, that I grew up in, was go to school, put your head down, work hard, study for the exams, try to get A's. And then midway through secondary school, we do exams called GCSEs. That's when you're 16 years old, in a range of subjects, usually about 8 subjects: French, maths, English, all the sorts of things you might expect. If you want to go to university, you stay for another couple of years till you're around 18. That's the same in the States, I guess, as when you're leaving high school. And then the objective is get to university. So there are certain university courses, of course, that have a career path. If you go to study medicine, you're more than likely going to wind up being a doctor. If you study law, good chance you'll be a lawyer. I did political science because I enjoyed it. And it doesn't really there aren't too many professional political scientists out there. There's a few who specialize in voting patterns and things like that as academics. But even at the point of university and getting toward the end of my bachelor's degree, I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I had a notion about journalism, but I felt that I hadn't really put in a lot of my own time into like the student paper and all of that. I hadn't been very career minded. Luckily enough, I did well enough to get onto a journalism course that's sort of organized by a big newspaper group in the UK called Trinity Mirror that runs several daily newspapers and quite a lot of regional ones. And that was the first time that, and quite jarringly, that I was sort of having to work on my own initiative an awful lot, because it was newspaper journalism particularly. So they teach you what makes for a good lead to a story or a headline, or, what kind of, how a good way to go about interviewing people, whether it's over the phone or in person. But for a lot of it, it was very practical. And it was based in a place called Newcastle in the northeast of England. And they said, right, this borough of the city is yours. Go to the local pubs, the local libraries, the community centres, go to see some faith leaders, see what's happening in that community and try and find a story. And it was, because it was based within a newspaper office. If you came up with something good enough, they would print it. You wouldn't be paid, but it's, the next step along the road. And that's where I made the move from everything was academic and geared towards trying to do well in exams for the sake of the grade, to no, here is, how you become good at something. And there's a lot of skills to learn, and we're going to compress it into a short space of time, and you're going to sink or swim, and we're going to give you a lot of rope, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn from those mistakes, and so on. So that was the window of my life where that really opened up my career path. So that was late. That was after university. It's a long answer.
Did you have jobs as a kid, though?
Yes, I worked in a bar. I worked in the local golf club behind the bar, and I worked. It was mainly bar work to keep me sort of, going while I was at university. So
I often use dating as an analogy with these things, and what I mean by that is when you were working at a bar or having just not necessarily focusing on career, but just having jobs to make money. Yeah. Or even doing, I don't know if you were involved with the projects, like I played in bands, which was work, but it wasn't necessarily a career trajectory when I was 14 years old. But the connection to dating is maybe thinking, okay, in these roles or these experiences of these different jobs, like getting a sense of, here's what I like and here's what I don't like. And knowing that can help me decide who I want to date next, or what type of career I may or may not want to pursue. Like, was that something that was top of mind, where you had a bit more either self-awareness or just a general awareness, because even just market awareness of what might be viable or not for yourself moving forward?
I would have to say in that time scale, in my late teens, no, I kind of pigeonholed my work, which was more or less weekends toward the end of school, and at university a little more often than that, as just a way to make a bit of extra money so I could go out with my friends and have a good time. I did come away from it, I suppose, thinking that the service industry wasn't particularly for me. I didn't really enjoy the crowded bar and, people yelling at me to, that they wanted a refill or that kind of thing. It was very utilitarian in that way for me. It was just a way of getting some extra money.
I worked a few shifts in a restaurant. This was like in grad school, so early 20s, in Little Italy in Baltimore, a fine Italian restaurant, which was the dumbest fucking job in the world, by the way, Neil, because I really don't know shit about wine and I hate cheese. So I don't know what I was doing there, except that a good friend was a waiter and he gave me an opportunity, or his boss did. But again, and it's funny, I haven't thought about this in a very long time, but that first shift that I worked that night, and at that point, I think my intention was I'd become a waiter sooner than later. But, I was the guy rolling up the silverware in the fancy napkin and serving the bread and the water and things like that. And I remember I was setting up my first shift, a big table for a party. And I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach. And it felt like real anxiety. And at least at that time, I was insightful enough to know, oh, that's good anxiety. That's my body telling me this is not necessarily a good fit for you right now. This may not, pay attention, Jordan. This may not be the thing that you want to pursue in a long-term type of way. And even though it was deeply uncomfortable at that time, and I was also in a position where I needed to find some sort of income, at least it was a nice red flag. You're on a date with some person and they say something or they interact with you or someone else on the date in a way that just lets you know, okay, red flag. They may have lovely qualities, but perhaps they may not be the best fit for me to continue pursuing.
Yeah. One thing I think in retrospect I learned from that job was that I met a co-worker who was also a good friend of mine, just from, this is going to sound really antiquated and weird, but it's very normal in Ireland to have single-sex schools. So I went to an all-boys school, which has a sister school, if you like, across town. And sort of the boys and girls would get together after school and make their friendships that way. And so this young woman was a linchpin, if you like, after having read this book in that establishment, because she was hypersocial, really, really good with the customers, very, very friendly by nature. And she was waiting tables more than, working the bar, although she could do both. And I was never that. I was always a little bit uncomfortable, particularly when things got extremely busy, and you just feel a bit stressed when you see a five deep bar on a Saturday night or something like that. But if Leslie wasn't there, people wanted to know where she was, that kind of a thing. And I feel that, you don't have to be the tremendous chef in a restaurant to be the linchpin. You could be on the waiting staff and somebody that people love that way, or a barista in a coffee house that people love, who's extra friendly, who clearly is having a good time and enjoying their work. And I think that's what I took from this book, is that it really doesn't matter what your job is. It's kind of, what you bring to it, with some exceptions, I guess, which, I mean, I do have a written question that we'll get to, further on in the show. Someone sent me by direct message, just somebody who really dislikes their job. And I have some thoughts, and I'm sure you will too, on that, Jordan. But yes, there can be linchpins in more or less any walk of life, I think, in the world of work.
Yeah. What about models growing up, as far as your parents and the way they related to career, what their actual career or jobs were and the ways in which they talked about it? Was that for you, maybe looking back on it now, a significant influence or not?
not especially. My parents were kind of, still are, I should say, fairly liberal, and not the kind of, you've got to be, we want you to be a lawyer, we want you to be a doctor, they're trying to map out my life for me. They gave me more or less the freedom to make my own decisions.
Mm.
And what I would say there is that I think something that was kind of missing from another thing that was missing from my schooling, and perhaps still is some kind of career counseling or guidance, before you reach the end of school. What we did was very cursory. I remember filling in a multiple choice questionnaire of all sorts of weird stuff. And I don't remember much about it because it was so long ago, but I will always remember what it recommended as my career at the end, which was to be a forester. And I'm still not entirely sure what a forester is or does. I assume it's somebody who takes care of a forest, like a forest ranger or something like that. But that was after my quiz, my kind of personality test. That's what it came up with, and I remember just laughing and throwing it away.
Well, you do have that rugged, outdoorsy type of vibe, Neal, as we all have come to know and love here in the post wrestling community.
Agreed.
For me, my parents were very influential, both explicitly and implicitly, in all kinds of different ways. My dad just always had his own business. I don't think his personality was suited to follow the rules, especially someone else's rules, like a boss. And I just saw him kind of like a pirate, just get on a ship and just like sail the open sea. And he often didn't have his own physical location. He would kind of go between, he's in the car business. And in the early 90s, he was very innovative in the car business, kind of seeing the open field and creating his own sense of unique value in the car business, to the point where over the years, a lot of the car dealerships got hip to it and realized, oh, we could just hire our own employee to do what this guy does for us and the different dealerships. But he showed me that you don't need to just follow one trajectory or follow some pre-written script, and that's the right thing to do. Because he was successful, my mom had the luxury to be a stay-at-home mom. But once my brother and I were like early teens, she started her own business. And I mean, she worked prior to having children, but she started like her own photo business and worked events. And especially as a 13 or 14-year-old, for me to see someone like her start that from the beginning and see the steps in which she took to do the proper things, whether legally or setting up with a bank, to the marketing of the business, to getting all the materials, to actually, hiring either myself or often her friends as help. Like, I saw someone start with nothing and then have something and get paid for it. And those are really, really helpful models for me to come up with the belief that when it comes to work or really anything, like, you can do anything, like almost literally. Yeah. And I share this often when I speak with younger people at universities or teen groups or whatever in the world. As long as you're not like banging someone over the head or doing something illegal, you can really do anything in life. And someone in my mid 30s, I kind of look back on what I've done and experienced and accomplished so far in my career. And that's one of the things I feel most proud of, is that I look at all the different ways in which I've weaved in different interests or passions, like music and performance and pro wrestling and marketing and mental health and group work and podcasting, communications. Yeah. And it feels incredibly circuitous, and it is in a sense, but at the same time, to me, it all feels like a pretty straight path, because for the past 10 plus years, my vision and mission has been really, really consistent. And maybe in a bit we can get into that as far as how do we begin, whether you're 17 or 47 and trying to figure out like what you actually want to do when you grow up. And spoiler alert, it probably won't be 1 or 5 things, but I think having a clear and consistent vision and or mission would be beneficial if we want to gain traction. And then it's just a matter of like consistency and figuring out all the different ways in which we can show up in the world by providing value, being generous in our pursuit of whatever makes us feel good or meaningful or valuable in the world. I will share, like for me, being a musician and having a band, being interested in having a band, like that was the best thing for me. Because as a kid, all I ever wanted as a kid, Neal, was to have a rock band and to be on stage and to have people like willingly and happily paying to see us perform, not just because I'm trying to nudge my mom or convince my friend group to come just to support. And in order to do that, I had to learn how to be an entrepreneur, right? So one, I had to learn how to manage the kids around me, because that's really hard. Like, how do you have a bunch of 14-year-olds productive together toward a goal? Well, someone needs to manage that. Someone needs to steer the ship, per se. And for whatever reason, that has always been a bit more intuitive or natural and interesting for me. So like I've learned how to manage people. I've learned how to manage projects. I learned how to be a booking agent. Like, where do we find the shows that we're going to play? Okay, now that we got a show, people have to come. If people don't come and the promoter in the venue does not make money, we will not be asked to play again. And so how do you market? How do you promote? Eventually, how do you merchandise and make money outside of selling the tickets or selling your CDs at the time? I've learned how to be a publicist. Like, how do we get featured in the newspaper? Or how do we get on the radio and things like that? And I guess maybe because at such a young age, my passion was so defined and my vision, at least at that point in life, was so clear on what was the future experience I wanted to have in life. Working toward it was not a chore. And in fact, I ended up really oftentimes enjoying the process of it. But again, I also liked Pokemon cards when I was in middle school or early high school. So I rented a table at the local flea market and was found a way to get boxes of Japanese cards imported and like had my own hustle doing that. So I think for me, at least entrepreneurially, like having a business, doing work, that was me playing in a sense. Like, I didn't need the money when I was 14 years old and investing in a large glass display case for my holographic Blastoise. Like, that was fun. I looked forward to getting up at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning to go play shop, but actually come home with a few $100s in cash that I could blow on CDs or whatever else that week. But I think an important takeaway from this conversation more generally, and especially I think Seth did a nice job of explaining this in this book, is that you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to be the business owner or the boss in order to take more ownership over the trajectory of your career, by bringing more humanity to the experiences and by leading with more generosity and value, thus increasing your sense of becoming indispensable. Where if, budget cuts happen, I've experienced it. I'm sure many people listening to me or watching us have experienced cuts in some sort of way if you're old enough. Well, who are the ones that the owner or the boss is going to keep in mind and be like, well, we can't lose that person. Like, that person's not replaceable. And what is it about that person that makes them irreplaceable? Like, is it their sense of optimism? Is it their ability to help build community or team within the organization? Is it their ability to stay calm under pressure? Is it their ability to go above and beyond the responsibility of the job on paper? Is it their ability to be an artist and to problem solve, to be creative and find new solutions or new ways of helping the company navigate in the market.
Yes, I find that very much, and I'm in the public sector. So entrepreneurship, being your own boss, was never really on my radar. Like yourself, my mum was a stay-at-home mother. My dad was in the public sector as well, and he was a boss, if you like, but within that kind of structure. So even amongst kind of extended family, there weren't too many examples of entrepreneurship or being your own boss for me. And it wasn't really on, as I say, on my radar. So the newspaper game was something I wanted to get into after university. I quite quickly spotted that my strengths lay more in the editorial side, perhaps, than in the going out and reporting. And also, I spotted the trend that newspapers were moving away from the traditional model because of the internet, and a lot of work was being sort of done remotely. And so they didn't need as many didn't really need a big team of editors on site to literally edit stories as they came through for publication the next day. Things were being outsourced to a hub electronically. So that's when I took the leap to the job that I've been in for the rest of my career. And it may sound like a very straight-laced kind of institution. It's our regional government here in Northern Ireland. It's actually really quite forward-thinking in its ethos. And one thing I really wanted to raise, which I think has forced a lot of companies and public bodies, business, all employers really, to think very hard about how flexible they need to be and how much trust that they put in their employees, was the pandemic. Because in most Western countries here in Europe, and I'm sure in nearly all of the states of the US and certainly in Canada, office type workers who were generally used to being in the same space together were, where they could, sent home. And I spent the better part of from around March 2020 to really the present day, because they've had to change their practices, working from home. And that had forced very quickly and very suddenly on our kind of higher management, you're going to have to place more faith and flexibility in your workforce, because some of them are parents, their kids are home from school, they're having to work and juggle all of that. They might not be working the traditional 9 to 5. It probably is going to work better for some to be early birds and for some to do some stuff in the evenings or in the weekends. What we found, and what everyone else I have spoken to who's been through a similar experience has found, is that the management, sort of the higher management strata, the directors or chief execs, were very pleasantly surprised by the levels of productivity that they got. Because when you have that sense of trust, you're not being kind of watched like a hawk by a supervisor all the time, and perhaps being in the situation of what I sometimes call forced familiarity, perhaps being stuck in an office all day, 5 days a week with some people, not everyone, but maybe there's somebody that you just don't get along with too well, or, you know, you wouldn't, other than work, you wouldn't choose to hang with. And all of that brought some challenges too, but I think a lot of positives in at least managers realizing, if we put trust in our employees and they pay that back, then we can put more trust in them, and they can be a bit more flexible, and they can work in different ways, and different ideas of how to collaborate when we can't be in the same room and all of that. And I think the pandemic was a huge, put the accelerator down on a lot of change within some of these employers.
And like, what are you talking about when you're pointing toward trust? Well, you're describing a human connection, the relationship. You're bringing more humanity to the nature of the job. You're talking about, this is how I feel, or here's a mutual feeling between me and an employee, if you're a manager or a business owner, and not that I have human capital that are ostensibly replaceable. We don't, I just need to see the resume. And, and everyone has the same fucking resume, because we have this sense, well, these keywords need to be on it. And to the point where a lot of larger companies, they just scan resumes and are looking for keywords. But is that really the most effective way to attract talent that is really going to like fucking ride with you and want to win with you and develop a sense of loyalty with you? I don't know. Maybe not. It's funny, as I finished the book an hour before we jumped on Zoom here, and for a good decade, I guess really up until the pandemic, I had this piece of paper on whatever bedroom I was living in at the given moment, and it had 8 words on it, and it came directly from the book Linchpin. And as I was reading the book, I was thinking like, fuck, I followed those 4, it was 8 words, but 4 suggestions ultimately. And I'll read them now. Stand out, give gifts, make connections, be remarkable. Like, I looked at those words every day, almost every day. And I put a lot of fucking faith in 2010 into those suggestions. Ultimately, it worked out. But again, working out is relative. So I'm deciding that for me, it has worked out. And as I was reading the book, the 200 plus pages of it, I was thinking, wait, these aren't specific chapters. Like, where did I get those specific things from? And then I realized maybe the second or third to last page of the book, and maybe I'll read, is this section called No Regrets. If you have the book, at least the copy I have, it's page 233, which essentially is the summary of the book. But he's saying, now that you know what to call the fear that has held you back all these years. By the way, we'll talk about that in a moment. What are you going to choose to do about the resistance? Now that you understand that society rewards you for standing out, for giving gifts, for making connections and being remarkable, what are you going to choose to do with that information? And I guess at that time, as I don't know, I was maybe 23 or so at the time, I took that as a challenge. But I guess for context, to help you understand where I was, as I said, as a kid, all I wanted to do was play in bands. And I did that many, many, many hundreds of times, making many thousands of dollars and having hundreds of incredible experiences. And even in the past couple weeks, still had some experiences doing that. It's just not the focus of how I'm going to make a living day in and day out right now. But I was having a lot of neck issues at the time in my early 20s, and it also just started becoming it just felt like work. And the thing that got me into that pursuit of love and passion and desire, probably mostly my fault, I obsessed with it to the point of it just consumed me and felt like work. And I stopped having fun, quite frankly. And I stopped doing that for a period of time. And then that was scary because I was toward the end of my undergraduate education. I did not have a major. At the time, I was dabbling in different majors that I thought would be helpful to my pursuit in being a band. So I was a PR major, and I was a mass comm major, and was taking all kinds of media classes and marketing classes. And by the way, one of the best things about going to university, if you're one of the few people out of 8 billion to have the privilege to do so, like, taste shit. Try different things. My dad, like, he was like, hey, would you try taking a law class just to see? I said, fuck it, fine. You're helping me financially with this journey. I'll take an intro to law class. It was the only class I got like a C. And I tried hard. It didn't compute. But again, that was good for me because I dated someone and I learned that, okay, in the future, I'm not going to date that type of person anymore. Like that's not a good fit for me. It doesn't feel good and it's not intuitive. So I am glad, by the way, that I tasted a lot in my university work, but not just in the coursework, like having conversations with the professors. These are people that are making money in the field that you're studying at that given moment. And people are everything in a sense. Yeah, there's the cliche of it's who you know, sure. But maybe the people that you do know don't like you or respect you or trust you, and then they become bigger hurdles toward getting what you want. So yeah, it's in who you know, but it's how you develop relationship with people in life that ultimately can be the one yes, or the one opening of the door, or the one connection to someone else that could get you closer to what you want in life, whether that's money or a peak life experience or whatever it may be. So
and I think systems, sorry, Jordan, I don't want to cut you off, but systems vary a little. But here, you apply to a particular course at university. They tend to be you do what they call single honors, so you're doing the entire one subject for your entire course, or a major minor, or a joint. But in your first year, they're generally speaking, depending on your university, and it's certainly the case when I went, in your first year, there's a lot of 101s where you can do what they call electives. And I, just like you, because that's why I wanted to mention it, I did Introduction to Law 101 with all the elite law students. And I thought it was tremendous because this particular module was all about To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was kind of pulling out jurisprudence examples from that novel, and then having moot courts, which are basically fake trials. And it was all taught by this incredibly charismatic lecturer who got headhunted by Harvard in the end. So he was an amazing guy. So that's taste things is a very, it doesn't have to be just while you're at university. If you go or whatever else, just try things out is a tremendous piece of advice. But totally. Sorry, you were in a narrative.
Just say the course you were explaining, if I had to taste that, like I would have thrown up everywhere and been miserable. So again, it would have been helpful for me to know that, of course. And like most things, you don't know unless you try it. So so I ended up choosing psychology for a few reasons. When I thought back on all the different courses I had taken up until that point for the first 3 years, my first semester was Psychology 101, to your point. And I remember thinking back, okay, that was one of the classes where I was at least engaged in the class discussion, and reading the assigned readings was a bit more interesting than some of the other classes that I was taking. And I also thought, at least at the time, that no matter what I do in life and career, you can't separate psychology from any of that, because like we're just dealing with people and we're dealing with ourselves. So to have an education in human and social psychology may not be that bad of an idea. So that's what I did. That was a version of at least things at university that gave me more energy. I also realized, at least the university that I went to, when I was taking the PR classes, the media classes, the marketing classes, like they weren't even talking about social media, and it was 2005. And at that time I was booking weekend tours using the MySpace Radius tool. And I would ask like, hey, I'm making fans and selling merch and making real money using these things. Look, when are we going to, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. And at least at that time I was like, well, maybe I don't need to invest my education this way. I'm just kind of doing it out in the real world and figuring this stuff out for myself. Very long story short, I ended up getting accepted to a local graduate program in clinical and counseling psychology. But very early on, I realized if I don't show up as a musician, more specifically as a drummer in this pursuit, I'm not going to feel good. And I believe I've shared some version of this story before, But here's where this podcast differs. So I listed those four things: stand out, give gifts, make connections, be remarkable. As soon as I figured out a way to credibly bring my musicianship and drumming into the field of clinical psychology and psychotherapy, that became my vision. That was the mission that I was on. Over time, more generally, the mission that I'm on is more helping people become more in rhythm with themselves and with their work and things like that. So the rhythmic piece is often metaphorical in my work now. Yeah. But at that time, 12 years ago, or more at this point, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, how can I be a drummer within this field of mental health and wellness and working with people and groups and all that. So I'll share with you what I did as a direct result of being inspired by this book. Okay, so like stand out. All right, what does that mean? Well, it means raising your hand, either literally in class or in your community, in the world, whether that's having a podcast or being public and like stand out, have people notice you. And one of the first things I did, I Googled like Baltimore. I was trying to find like just communities, like in media communities, more specifically in Baltimore, that would kind of vibe with my vision and what I was trying to make happen in the world. And I found at the time, this website was called whatweekly.com, and they were brand new, and their whole thing was, we're doing journalism and stories around positive stories in Baltimore, whether related to like social innovation or technology and art and culture and all that. Yeah. So I said, that sounds cool. Let me reach out to the people that are doing this. I asked to buy them coffee, and I told them, here's what I'm doing. I'm starting my first internship. I'm trying to incorporate drumming into counseling and work. Can I share my story? Can I share my insight? Can I share this through your platform? They asked me to write up a first article. They said, this is great. And then I built trust with them. And then they let me write about whatever the hell I wanted using their platform. So that was one specific concrete way in which I was trying to stand out. In doing so, that was me making connections, because I knew that they were cultivating a very intentional, impressive local community of all kinds of artists and professionals. And through that, I was, one person reads about my work, or I meet someone at a What Weekly party, and they end up pitching me to the local newspaper to be featured in, one of those people under 30 kind of things, which then opened up this whole business of Beat Well for me, because now I had all this free marketing of a credible newspaper telling the community how valuable I could potentially be to them. But making connections, like opening your mouth, talking to people, right? Like if you're sitting next to someone at I don't know, a new job, or at a class in your major at a university, like the person sitting next to you, they're probably on some sort of similar trajectory to you. So be the one to go first and like say hello. Like, how are you doing? What are you doing here? Like, what are you trying to make happen here? Like, actually connect with people. And with this idea of giving gifts, and I really like this section of the book all about gift giving. Look, a gift is not something that where you offer someone anything. Advice, help them move their stuff to a new apartment, give them a donation to their nonprofit, help flyer for their campaign. Like, if you're doing that with the expectation that you will get something of equal value in return, that is not a gift. That's tit for tat. Like, giving a gift is in the spirit of generosity. So giving without expectation. And perhaps the I don't know if irony is the right word here, but I think if we show up in the world in the spirit of generosity, and simply that, oftentimes we do get stuff in return. We don't know when or how, because the point is that we don't have the expectation of it. So for me, I was often showing up places and trying to connect people, and often offering my service for free for many reasons, but one, to be generous. And then the last, being remarkable. What does that mean? Like, are you are you interesting enough? Are you entertaining enough? Are you of service enough? Are you memorable enough that someone else will talk about you to someone else? Like, will remark about you, literally. And again, these things can mean different things to us, but at least for me, this was my Bible. Like, this was my blueprint, essentially. But unlike many traditional blueprints, it didn't tell me what the next step was. And that's a big part of this book, Linchpin. Like, there is no map. And that's why he calls linchpins artists. And again, to your very important point, when he says being an artist, that does not just mean writing a song or writing a poem, but being the hot dog vendor on 45th Street who smiles and makes eye contact and remembers the customer's name and gives them a human experience. Like, that's their artistry, for instance. And that's why maybe people will walk 10 blocks to 45th when they could get the same hot dog on 35th, right? But one of the vendors is the linchpin. One is remarkable. And by definition, most are average. And average is playing it safe. It's hiding in plain sight oftentimes. It's not raising our hand. It's not us saying, like, I'll go first. Here's my contribution to the community. But there is a big section in the book called The Resistance, which I think is one of the better 50-page passages of any book around the nature of fear and anxiety. And we have this resistance within us, ultimately trying to keep us safe. It's survival mechanism. But often the message of what it means to stay safe is to go to the center, retreat to the center. Don't go to the edges of what you're doing, because maybe you will stand out. Maybe you will get found out for being a fraud or whatever our unhelpful thoughts may be. Being generous, raising your hand in class. Sometimes when I would do that, my heart would beat really fast. And maybe if I was younger, I would feel that type of anxiety, and the resistance would tell me, oh no, don't say that thing because it might not be the right answer, or someone may not like it. But I think he does a nice job helping us name and become more familiar with what that resistance is within us that's trying to keep us safe. But in a 21st century economy and job market, playing it safe, he would argue, and I would argue as well, may often be the least safe thing if we're looking for long-term job stability, and in ways in which we feel good and feel like we're living a life of meaning and are not replaceable ultimately.
I think
real quick before, please.
One of those principles that struck me most, I think, is the giving gifts thing, and it's really without condition. Give something meaningful without expectation, and there seems, on the face of it, some people might think, well, why should I? Or what's the guarantee that something will come back the other way? Well, I think that's just something that you discover in life. And there are people that, fairly late in my career, and I count some of these sort of side hustles, if you like, and I'm not making, I don't mean really a money-making enterprise. I mean the things that are giving me some expression outside of the workplace, through this podcast, for example, through being able to write at postwrestling.com a little. I don't think those things would have happened without, and I don't want to big myself up by anything like that, but without offering something first, however you would want to quantify that. And I don't really talk about this much, so it's forgive me, but I remember getting in touch with John Pollock people for the site quite a while ago, probably a couple of years ago, to say, John, my day job is editing, and I know that I draft tons of memos and things that get distributed to politicians and stuff, and it all has to be proofread, or it's a very laborious process of reading your own work. Anyone who writes will know this. The best authors in the world have teams of editors. Reading your own work for typos or whatever is quite difficult, even with all the software we have these days. So I just volunteered to do it, because I always read his work. I think John's a tremendous writer, very knowledgeable, and a bit of a historian about wrestling and all the rest of it, and has some very nice literary little flourishes as well in his writing. So I read his stuff anyway. So I just offered, look, what if I read it, and if I see something else, I'll just throw. And by the way, people, it's never anything egregious. It's I'm talking about very tiny little the typos, or like orphaned letters when things have been edited, things like this. These things happen, basically. So I did that, and I think it just built up a level without this. There's no agenda whatsoever, other than to try to be helpful to a product that I really, really enjoyed. And I believe that has led to other things, like the opportunity to do some news reporting for the site, to give Andrew and John a break at the weekends, when I can and when they need it. And that's an example, I think, of just I feel a bit weird saying, I gave gifts to them or whatever. I don't know how I would quite put it that way, because it feels a bit kind of arrogant to say that, but
it's just being generous. It's just generous, showing up,
putting
and
myself
providing
on the
value.
Radar. Yeah, all of those things.
And so many people, I think, often in relationship, especially when it's a business dealing, they lead with, "This is what I want." Like, before there's any relationship built, like if you're on LinkedIn for 6 hours, eventually you'll start getting like messages of like, "Hey, insert your name," and like it's just, they're already making the pitch, but where's the humanity?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the attempt to like build relationship and trust and mutual liking and respect and interest between people? And I think it's these people are going for these like small short-term kills, and maybe you get some, but how sustainable is that? And like how interesting or like good of a catch is that? Things have to play out over time. And in a bit, I'll kind of share how eventually I applied all this to getting a full-time leadership position with the Ring of Honor 5 years ago without having any real experience professionally in pro wrestling, or like working for Sinclair Broadcast Group, which at the time owned Ring of Honor, or having like on paper legitimate marketing experience or communications experience, to be honest. But I'll continue with the Beatwell business. Again, like I was trying to make a business viable to support some sort of lifestyle for myself that to most people, they didn't even know that was a service in the world. I take hand drums and percussion instruments, and I sit people in a circle. I put these instruments in quote unquote non-musicians' hands, and I facilitate musical experiences. And my thought was, yeah, people will pay me for this. Okay, well, how do you do that? So I said, obviously, I tried to build community. I started promoting myself or marketing myself in less salesy type of ways by just sharing my experiences, talking about why I do what I do, talking about some of the experiences of the work. But also for a year and a half, Neal, I did it for free. And I did that for
Yeah.
many reasons. So any person that I knew that had access to a group of people, whether that was a friend that was a teacher of some kind, someone that worked in an after school program, anyone that worked like in a nursing home, or just friends who work in businesses, and maybe the business would allow me to come in. Like I did it for free. And one of the things for me to figure out was, how can I get good at this, and in which ways could I potentially be of value to a similar community in the future? Another reason I did it for free for so long was to ask myself, do I like this? Do I even want to be doing this? And try to build a career or a business doing this. And then also I would always ask if the person that is hiring me or in a position to hire me a second time, like if they could be present, ideally participating, that would be great. And the only other thing I would really ask in return is if they found it to be of value, that they would write a testimonial for me for a website. No different than the Beat Well coaching business I workshopped and launched as a result of the pandemic and not being able to do this type of work in person for the foreseeable future. And Wai is one person I offered a handful of sessions to. Again, no pressure expectation, but I asked him, and Neal, you the same. I asked you.
That's right.
If you found this to be of value, then I'd ask you to consider writing me a testimonial for my marketing and to provide a headshot. But if you don't want to, that's okay. And me just doing the sessions was enough of you being generous by offering me your time. But my hope is that I would over deliver in the value of those sessions, to the point where someone like you and Wai were happy to spend some time writing a testimonial for the service.
Very much so. And, I still to this day very much appreciate that opportunity, because I don't know that I would have come to you, even though you were on my radar through, first of all, this podcast when it started, and even before that with the Surviving Quarantine episode on the Up Next podcast. I don't know that I would have come to you sort of out of the blue and said, maybe I would have looked for somebody more local, something like that. I don't know, just the headspace. So it's something I'm very grateful for, and I don't think it's out of line to say that we've continued with. And it's been absolutely tremendous, and I have had incredible gains from it. You haven't told me to say this. In fact, I said when we talk about, let's be honest, but we have a chat about the episode before the episode happens. Brief chat, not a script by any stretch or a running order. But I didn't know whether I really wanted to talk about the fact that we have a kind of semi-professional relationship as well, and we do. But the thing about it that's so tremendous, and this is one of the reasons, that you and I are such good friends, I think, Jordan, is that what you bring to that is your whole self in a very natural way. So you're still my friend when we're discussing career or areas of life coaching and things like that. You're not the guy with the half moon glasses and a notebook kind of, writing things down. You're not Fraser, and you're not, it's a very kind of, and I guess there's a question here, which is like, do you, and I think I probably know the answer, you tailor your approach, I assume, to whoever it is you're coaching. With you and I'm assuming that relationship is somewhat different than, for example, someone else who,
of course,
is,
yeah. I learned that from teaching music. I've taught guitar and drums for 15 years now, and I learned from the ways in which I was taught, both the things I liked and the things I didn't like. Like, I'm going to meet the client or the student, or in psychotherapy, the patient. Sometimes I'm going to meet them where they're at. If a business is hiring me, an organization, I'm going to meet them where they're at. And again, that isn't me showing up in some false or inauthentic way. But the way that I interact with you, I'm going to often speak, and my energy, my appearance, sometimes like my references, it'll be different with how much humor or not I use. When it's with you, it'll be different than when I'm working with a child, and it'll be different perhaps when I'm working with a bunch of corporate executives in suits for the first time that I meet them.
Yeah.
Right. So of course, like, meet people where they are, understand their needs. And in doing so, sometimes I will realize, especially with the Beatwell business, I will realize, you know what, I may not be the best fit for you. And I think that's key too. A lot of people sometimes from a business perspective are so thirsty or desperate for the gig or the client or whatever, that they'll say yes to everything, and they'll try to be all things to everyone. They won't be specific. And I think if you try to be all things to everyone, like, then you're not going to be much to most, if that makes sense. So
perfect sense.
Again, with the Beatwell groups, I tried it in the schools and the camps with kids with different ages of children, special needs, elderly care, business, conference, faith-based. I've done it with hundreds of different types of groups and cultures. And as I've continued doing it, I've gotten clearer and clearer. This is where I feel most effective in the work. This is when I'm enjoying the work the most. I know for me, if someone's going to reach out and hire me to just do 60 minutes of straight drumming, I'm usually not interested in doing that, because that's not that fun for me. I want to also facilitate discussion. I want to connect deeper intellectually and emotionally than just drumming may allow. So as my career has progressed and I can be a bit more particular in who I'm for, well, that helps me in a lot of ways, because I'm going to get better at that, which is going to make me more valuable in the market. But also that allows me to be better at marketing, right? I'm more targeted in my marketing, because my drum circle program isn't for anyone. Like, if I can be specific that it is for this type of business having this type of conference, well, then it's a lot more obvious for me, like, where I should be directing my networking and my marketing efforts. If I know who this is for, when I'm writing copy or when I'm recording a video of myself, I know who the audience is, because I'm much more intentional about what this service, who I'm intending to serve.
Yeah,
ultimately.
And I've said this to you in private on more than one occasion. Like, I would characterize our work together, I don't mean the podcast, I mean in the coaching, as a conversation between two good friends who meet each other with a lot of humor and a lot of that, except that you have a ton of expertise, knowledge, experience in the coaching realm that you're bringing to me, and the challenge, the element of accountability. All of those things are there as well. But it's all a better an experience from my point of view, because we're being incredibly authentic and trying to sometimes very unsuccessfully, audience, try to make Jordan laugh. He's not much of a laugh out loud guy most of the time.
I know Sel.
I try. He no-sells me all the time. Now and again. I think once or twice.
But you'd have to be funny in order to make me laugh. So perhaps that's the issue.
This is twice in 2 days. You buried me, Goodman, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. I think it's also important to mention. So, so we'll get to that in a sec, but the relationship I have with you, really the multiple relationships I have with you, like, I'm very intentional about that. And I check in with you often about that, especially from a professional context.
Yes.
And just to be clear, like, I am not providing the service of psychotherapy with Neal.
No.
I never would, because we already know each other and we're already friendly. And certainly once I start working in the psychotherapy relationship, like, I will never be friends with that person. I can like the people I work with. I can have, I can have love for them. I can care for them. But it would not be appropriate for me to ever be their friend outside of the work. So just to make that crystal clear for those paying attention. So yeah, look, I've whether it was figuring out how to make my band successful, or a Pokemon card hustle successful, or this Beatwell drum circle for wellness and team building outcomes business successful. Like this book, I can't recommend this book enough, people. At least for me, it really changed my life. And it gave me a belief of, okay, well, if I can do this like drum circle thing and figure that out, well, maybe I can do anything. Maybe I could work for a pro wrestling company, because besides music, pro wrestling was something that I've loved ever since I was 4 or 5 years old. No one suggested that I engage with it. I was just naturally attracted to it for the entirety of my life in ways like I'm sure most of the people listening to me now are. I mean, you're not just watching SmackDown for 2 hours a week. Like, you want to dig deeper into it, whether it's learning about what it's like to, I don't know, to follow the business of it, or the actual art of it. All that fascinated me. When I was 14, I had the opportunity to train and perform as a professional wrestler and did some ring announcing and did that for a year and a half. And that was very cool. Very, very cool. But in doing so, I also would like talk to the owner of the promotion and understand how they're going about marketing the events and how they go about, okay, here's the card, match order. I was always interested in like how it works. And I've always paid attention to it, so much so that I've been, like quoted publicly many times, that pro wrestling and the business of it, the art of it, influenced my music career as much, if not more, than the music business and certain bands influenced what I did as a professional musician. And once Ring of Honor was acquired in 2011 by Sinclair, well, things got interesting for me because I live in Baltimore, where Sinclair is headquartered. And for a good while, they did every TV taping not far from where I lived, in Baltimore City, maybe a 25-minute drive at the time. And so for a good while, once a month, I was going to the shows as a fan. And I had zero vision at that point of like, maybe I could work with them. And eventually I had the idea of, oh, it would make sense for them to hire me to do a Beatwell program with their staff and their talent, because for the team building, and there's it's improvisation and there's trust involved and all that good stuff. So that was a clear vision I had for myself. And I actually wrote a Facebook post maybe in 2014, writing that, to state something out loud or to write it down or to share it publicly, like that's making it more real. If we're going with like a law of attraction type of vibe. And I said, I will do a Beatwell play shop with the Ring of Honor roster. And that did not happen, but I ended up getting a full-time position with the company 3 years later. And so when I was going to the shows, again, like I was paying attention. I was figuring out, who's that guy taking tickets? He looks kind of important. Oh, okay, that's Gary Juster. Okay, he's worked at WCW for like its entirety, and he's like done all this stuff in like wrestling promotion and whatnot. Okay, that's interesting. Who are these handful of people in suits? Who's the person doing merch? And I would just pay attention and just get a sense of what their organization was. Again, I wasn't really angling for anything at that time. I was just naturally curious about the operation. A few years later, one of their on-air non-wrestling talent, I see at a Starbucks. Again, like I stand out in the Seth Godin language. I go up to him. Hey man, how's it going? My name's Jordan. I'm a fan of yours. I'm well aware of what you do. Here's some of what I've done in wrestling when I was a kid. You may know this person. Build rapport and then ask, hey, would you want to actually meet here next week and chat? And that person said, sure. And in doing so, I like learned a bit more about the organization. And again, I wasn't asking for anything, but my behaviors were starting to map, if I was being honest, toward getting closer to that organization in some form or fashion. And I was a fan. I would pay attention to the show. Like, I would study their product and use the word serendipity or luck or good fortune or fate or whatever you would subscribe to. But in early 2016, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, the local airport near my parents. I'm boarding it to go back home to Baltimore, and I see Joe Koff in line to get on my flight, who was the COO of Ring of Honor from 2011 up until earlier this year. And at that point, I'd already done a lot of the legwork. I knew exactly who that was. I knew what he did to some extent, and I knew my shit when it came to understanding like the present day nature and business of Ring of Honor from an outsider perspective, of course. Mind you, Neal, I was sick as fuck, to the point where before I saw him, I was literally getting ready to call my mom and say, hey, can you pick me up? I'm going to reschedule the flight until tomorrow morning. Like, I feel like I'm going to throw up right now. I was not feeling well. But I saw Joe Koff in line, early boarding, because he's Joe Koff. Yeah. And I was like, fuck, I got to get on that flight. And so I did. And I made a promise to myself that at a minimum, as I pass him, assuming he would be sitting closer to the front than not, I would shake his hand, I'd introduce myself, and I would thank him for his contributions to Ring of Honor. And so that's what I did. Yeah. And then I had the audacity, when he was nice to me in this very micro moment that lasted 5 seconds, I took the risk of saying, you mind if I sit next to you? And he said, sure. And I could imagine that he was thinking, fuck, what did I get myself into? Some random wrestling fan asked to sit next to me on the flight. He knows what I'm into and what I do. And I was intuitive or socially aware enough to let him lead me in how comfortable he was in talking about his business. Yeah. I knew I was not interested in being a fan. I was not interested in asking for anything, certainly. I just wanted to get to know this person, because again, I could get to know him and think, you know what? I wouldn't want to do business with that person. That could be a possibility. Of course. So I really liked the first question he asked me. He asked me straight up, what do you think we could do better? And I really admired that. That felt like genuine, and there was curiosity, there was humility, and there was a desire to improve the business. And in return, I asked him, well, like, who's your target market? And that accomplished a couple things in the moment. One, that was me implicitly letting him know I understand marketing. Yeah. And also, I didn't want to be presumptuous about who that market was. He ultimately said it was me, someone like my age. But his answer would have dictated, or his answer to my question would have dictated my answer to his question of what could they do better. Because maybe they were interested in attracting 12-year-olds, so they would have a future fan base with disposable income a few years down the road. And so we just chatted the entire time, and not just about wrestling, because I didn't want to make it just about that. But I talked about my Beatwell stuff. We talked about music. We talked about being Jews in Baltimore and all that stuff. And at the end of the very lovely flight, in which still the whole time I felt like I was going to pass out and or throw up, but kept it together. He never knew. We exchanged cards. And there was no plan, but it was this assumption that, yeah, we'll probably see each other again. And after thinking about it for a couple of weeks, Neal, excuse me, as I spit a seed in my periphery cup, I reached out to him thinking, why would this guy reach out to me out of the blue? I reached out to him, hey, man, that was a cool chat. You want to get lunch sometime? And he said, sure. And when we got lunch, I wanted to like put my cards on the table. And basically what I said was, hey, I'm not asking for anything. I just want to let you know I am interested perhaps at some point in like collaborating with you or Ring of Honor. And he gave me the most lovely response. he said, I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, it's just a matter of time and fit. And at least for me, like, I didn't want to feel like I was just trying to use him or manipulate him, or like, I wanted to like let him know, here's a desire that I have. And he gave me a very lovely response. And then once that was out of the way, we could just enjoy our lunch for the next hour, mostly talking about the pro wrestling business. So I guess as far as Linchpin, you know, that was me certainly standing out and making the connection, right? That was me, again, sitting in class, having the audacity, having the courage, not listening to my inner resistance, to raise my hand and to say I, or to go up to the guy and introduce myself and shake his hand. And then really for the next year plus, it was about gift giving and being remarkable and continuing to stand out. And again, expecting nothing in return. Because I really didn't. And I didn't even have necessarily a vision for a good while of what I could or would want to do with them besides a Beat Well group. But I went to all their local shows. I ordered all their pay-per-views, spent my money. I watched most of their weekly TV. I studied their social media. I studied their business. And especially with the pay-per-views, at the end, I would email Joe, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like, and here are some of the solutions I would offer to fix the things I didn't like. I wasn't asking for shit. I wasn't even asking for a thank you, even. It was me in the spirit of generosity, take it or leave it. And he would always respond in positive ways. And again, and it's a tricky thing because, of course, there's a part of me that would like something to happen down the road. But again, it's this idea of how honest can we be with ourselves, of if nothing happens, is that okay? Would we still be okay with the generosity, with the giving?
Yeah.
And for me, it was yes. To be very frank, Neil, like, I'm in negotiations at some level with a major wrestling company right now, one of the major wrestling companies right now. I'm also in like negotiations with like a very big music project. And right now it's like, if something happens, would it be great? Sure. Depending on like how like the negotiation goes down and the vision agreed upon. But like, if it doesn't happen, I'd be fine with that too. You know, like, I'm not desperate. I'm not thirsty for it. And whether you're a 17-year-old kid trying to like get your first job at some local establishment, or some mid-career professional trying to do some like big boy shit in the world, like, if we don't come from a place of expectation and pressure and desperation, like, I think, one, that gives us a better shot of getting what we want, but it also creates more peace for us internally.
Agreed. And even in, even in the less sexy sort of standard, if you like, office job, that I've found that to be true. That if you show up, if you're nice to people, you're generous to people, generous with your time, friendly, all of those things, and generally curious about other people, it comes back around. And more so when you don't have expectations and you're quite, as you said, genuinely not expecting something in return, that transactional kind of thing. Should we just cut into our conversation for the moment? Because I see a hand up. I'm not sure who this is. I think he's a new caller, a first-time caller, perhaps.
Okay, let's do that. And then I can finish that Ring of Honor story and close that up. But yeah, of course, we want to get to our lovely post-wrestling community before I self-indulge.
Yeah, I'll ask this guy to unmute himself, please. Caller?
Who is this? It's an odd name, I see.
Hello, hi. My name is Wai. I'm a big fan of the wellness policy of the both of you, Jordan and Neil, and been enjoying the conversation here. As I unsuccessfully am trying to rock a baby to sleep, but I I've really enjoyed. I mean, I'm familiar, obviously, with like some of your stories, but maybe not some of the particulars of your mindset of how you got into Ring of Honor, and for you, Neil, how you might have, I guess, had the idea to do anything for a post. Um, I've been fortunate enough in my career that like I don't know if I've ever like needed to seek anything out in that way. Like I think I've been very lucky in that I've quite enjoyed what I've done like for most of my career. And that maybe that just stems from like me being lucky and choosing something I actually enjoyed, when I was like 18 years old, and sticking through with it. Um, but I will say like I've had moments of frustration, great frustration, or while working and thinking about how to take that next step to find that dream job. This type of information seems really important. I'll say now that I'm in the position of like almost like more often than not, like being the person to consider a new hire, or at least like choosing people to work with us. Like I think everything you guys have said is very applicable just from my perspective now, because we've never put out a job posting. We've never like gone on to, we've never looked at a resume. Anybody who we've ever brought on to help us with anything in any regard has sought us out first, and has often like just been first of all like been a listener, or at least been a fan, and has been familiar with what we do, and has oftentimes offered just to kind of do stuff for us, with no expectation of getting anything back in return. I'm thinking of people like Robert Brocky, who like when we were still in our kind of like transitional period from the law to like post wrestling, he just like, here's a guy like out of nowhere, like putting all of our archives up for free on this like like guerrilla review for life. I forget, it was like this sort of weird like homemade website just has all
John,
of our shit.
John and Way for Life
That's it.
something.
That might have been it. Yeah,
I remember that tiny moment of time between the end of the law and the launch of Post Proper, where that website was a godsend, because you guys didn't miss shows, that you were still doing your reviews on there.
We were putting everything up like not on an RSS, but like on archive.org. And so like, here's a guy who just decided, hey, I have the skills to like, make this a bit more efficient, and just went ahead and did it. And now like, for the past 5 years, he's been like our webmaster. And it's like, we weren't looking actively for a webmaster, but by the time it came for us to look for somebody like that, here's a guy who like we already completely trust and knows like, we know he's not taking advantage of us, and we obviously don't want to take advantage of him. And in fact, we want to pay him back for everything that he's done for us. And that goes like, for people like you, Jordan, people like you, Neil, who you built that trust up with your potential employer, or just the potential people that you're looking to, do something with. And ultimately, maybe like you're already way ahead of like, anybody who's just simply blindly sending in the resume, for instance. So it's a lot of groundwork, and again, like you said, Jordan, you kind of have to do it without anything in expectation of anything in return. But at least I can speak from like at least my perspective, like that is more often than not who we choose to work with.
Totally. First of all, Wai, because this is your unofficial return to the wellness policy. Congratulations. We love you. We're very proud of you. And Neil and I take pride in steering this shit as you needed to take time away, knowing that it's yours as well. And because of that, we treat a show like this with mostly with respect and professionalism.
Yes.
So we want to congratulate you publicly. But it's interesting what I was thinking. You were talking about, okay, here's someone that out of the spirit of generosity, and not because they were told, not because the boss chose them to do it, not because their parent or the teacher assigned them to do it. This was someone that was compelled to host and archive your stuff, and in return, they ended up getting to be more intimately involved with something that obviously they're passionate about. So that is one example of being a linchpin. But Wai, you and John are wonderful examples of being linchpins, and that is why you are attracting people like that to you. So you are in a very lucky position, perhaps. For almost a decade, you had runway to just give your gifts. You know, I was a listener for most of that. Like, you never asked me for money to access your shows. You gave it away, and you were in a position to do that. But also, like, you guys, especially, I'm thinking more recently as pro wrestling podcasters, or as John is a pro wrestling journalist. Even the ways in which you've decided to engage with community, in the ways in which you've decided to navigate topics like a Saudi Arabia deal, as a great example. And the ways in which, like, there was no map for you to do that. There was no right or wrong. That's part of your artistry in deciding, how do we cover a topic like this? And whether it's interviewing non-wrestling people, or creating some sort of charity component, or just the levels of maturity and professionalism and thoughtfulness in which you publicly engage around the topic, like, that is you. That's why you have an audience, and had a significant audience on day one of having Post Wrestling as an independent enterprise, the way that you support your child now. And that's one of the many reasons why, like, I fuck with you guys, because that's who I want to interact with in life, whether I'm a passive fan or listener, or now a creative partner with a project like this, or just simply a friend. So you may not have needed a book like this, but for whatever the reasons may be, intuitive or otherwise, like, you are a wonderful living example of most of what we're talking about in this chat today.
Thanks for that. Again, like, throughout all of this, I don't lose sight of the fact that I think I'm in a very unusual and very fortunate situation where I can, like, even dictate the type of content that I want to create. Whereas I think a lot of people, even in this space, or even in my prior job, if, like, working for an employer, again, I was even lucky, like, working for the Fight Mark, where, like, they largely didn't care about what we did. And so we would just, we would have the audience, and we would just go ahead and do what we wanted. But some people just don't have that freedom, and are only able to kind of clock in, do a job, and then don't really have much freedom to do something else. But yeah, everything you've just kind of described has really, just been pretty unconscious for us. We're simply acting towards, like, what we liked to do, how we wanted to represent ourselves, and what we thought the audience wanted. So I guess, I don't know if there's, like, any sort of, like, lesson to be taken from that as well, just to simply maybe follow your own instincts. But I'm glad it's worked out.
I think the authenticity of both you and John shines through in a way that, there's a million wrestling podcasts out there, and some of them wouldn't have touched the Saudi matter. Some of them wouldn't have touched Black Lives Matter when it was dominating popular culture and news that entire summer. Just, because they wouldn't want to shirk away from that. Some of them wouldn't have talked about the pandemic at all, because they would have thought, well, our audience might want an escape from that. But in people that we check in with, podcasters, I think you'll agree, are in this rather odd position of a slightly asymmetric relationship with most of their listeners. We, as a body of listeners, know you better than you know us, for the most part. And so if you're anything less than authentic, your listeners are going to know, they're going to tell, because they've gotten to know you guys as people, follow this sort of life journey of when John and his wife were expecting Max just at the time of the whole Anthem thing. And that, and the recent stuff this year with your we're getting married last year, and then having a baby this year, all of these things. And, I think as listeners, people care a lot more than you might think about all of that, not just the ones that have perhaps gotten a little closer to you, which I will admit was not quite an agenda, but something I was also keen on, was just because I like just coming from the place of, I like these guys very much. They seem wonderful, and it would be great to become a little bit more friendly with them, so there was that element of it all too. So yes,
Yeah.
I've lost my thread entirely in that, but it's great that you're on an episode of the Wellness Policy, and love to Oscar, who I think you said was your nursing, or he's in your arms right now. So
I gave up and gave him to mom, but which is ultimately usually how these episodes typically end. But but no, I appreciate what you said, and I'm very aware of like that sort of unusual relationship that like a broadcaster or any sort of like content creator might have with their audience, and I feel like there, like maybe in the early days there might have even been like a bit of hesitation to like engage too much or reveal too much about our own personal lives, but I think I'm just largely like through interactions, like just like we kind of had to open ourselves up, or at least I felt like I did, I had to open myself up to like actually connecting with people, and to like my goal in any sort of like interaction, like you or anybody who like might have known us through the shows first and foremost before us as people, is to try to like get rid of that relationship, or at least try to like break that down. Like I know Jordan, you like you bought a shirt with my face on it, and you very proudly wear it, and you continue to wear it to this day, which is hilarious at this point. But it's I tried not to like put up any sort of barrier between us. Like you and I are just friends, and I'd like to feel that way with everybody. But that's it's just kind of going back to the whole I mean, so much of this is about authenticity, isn't it? As you've always said.
Yeah, it's bringing humanity to our experiences, and that includes our professional experiences. And when we've lived such culturally for many, many, many decades, if not the past century plus, we've had these expectations or created these norms, or we're taught like, don't speak out of turn, or don't rock the boat, or follow the rules, follow the directions, don't color outside of the lines. And I think a big punchline of this conversation is that perhaps playing it safe by just staying within the bounds, that may not be the best posture to get what you want out of career necessarily. Because then what makes you different than anyone else? Wait, I bought that shirt, I think back in 2016 because a Facebook memory reminded me of that. And it's funny. It's at this point in my life and career, it's not surprising that I have some sort of creative project like this with you. Because me getting that shirt and wearing it at all my band performances and things like that, yes, that was me standing out, like getting your attention. That was me being remarkable, whether you were positively or negatively talking about me, if you see it on social media or something. But if I know for a fact that if my intentions weren't pure, if I wasn't generous in nature, if I was just trying to get something out of you with those behaviors, I never would have had a shot, because like you're not dumb and you have a bullshit detector, and you would have detected that, and you would have like either told me to cut it out or just like ghosted me in some kind of way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you getting a shirt with my face on it had absolutely nothing to do with any of our other interactions. Like Neil, I heard you on Braden and Davey's podcast. I thought, oh, this guy actually has a lot to say. And it was through that we, I guess, like you mentioned, you had offered some, well, I guess we had built some sort of like personal connection somehow offline. And then we did some of those sessions, which I really just enjoyed the conversation. It was ultimately what they ended up becoming. They just ended up being kind of, strictly conversations between friends, as I'm sure you found, Neal, in your interactions with Jordan. And it was the type of conversation that I felt like our audience might have actually really enjoyed. So that was that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could have worked out very awkwardly, if I started a chat with you about politics in Hong Kong, because I happened to have a friend who emigrated about the same age as you to Northern Ireland, pre the 97 handover. And I know we're getting way off the topic at this point, but if that conversation had been super awkward, then it would have been probably things would have gone in a different direction. As it was, I'm very proud and honored to call you a friend of some degree at this point. Here we are now, and that it does tie back into all of this, because it's about personal connections, and as Jordan has mentioned over and over again, whether it's with the drum circles, whether it's getting on that plane when he felt like death that day to talk to Joe Koff, or at least say hello to him, just some interaction. And I think that whatever the career, as Jordan said, whether it's a hot dog seller on the street, whether it's an office worker, prison guard, God, no, I mean, whatever it happens to be, you can be exceptional and bring humanity and generosity, and the more of authentic you are, the more successful and happy you're going to be in whatever it is that you do.
I don't want to hold you guys up. I know, Jordan, you still have, the rest of your story to finish. So sorry to interrupt, and I'll let you guys get back to it. But thank you guys for the show.
Thank you, caller. We appreciate it. I'll be incredibly brief because we're rounding the 2-hour mark, Neal, and I know we have a couple of questions from other listeners, and we appreciate all of them. But look, again, to go back to the story, I had a relationship. It was built to some degree, and then for me, it was a matter of how can I study the product enough to have some sort of vision to pitch. How can I be of value specifically to this company? A lot of people may go with the approach of, hey, what can I do for you? What do you need? I'll do anything. Well, that actually creates more work for the person you're asking to figure that out, instead of what I ultimately did about maybe 15 or 16 months after that plane ride. I called him up and said, hey, I'm ready to contribute at a high level. Can we have a chat about it? And I built up enough trust at that point with him, not just from being a fan and the emails with suggestions, but again, like I was standing out and I was like using whether LinkedIn or like local media that I knew he would pay attention to. I was getting the world to let him know that I was valuable and would be successful, whether I was involved with him or pro wrestling or anything like that. Was not that was not the requirement. I wanted to tell a story with integrity in various means that I was someone worth considering doing business with. So we had the meeting. I had a piece of paper and I had my 8 to 12 bullet points of, here are either opportunities I see for growth, or just things that you are not currently executing on. Here are my solutions. Would you be interested in finding a slot for me to contribute in these ways? And then 4 months later, a full summer of more pitching, others in the company and negotiating and all that good stuff. I found myself with a full-time job, like with benefits and like a cubicle. Like, Neal, I'm telling you, that was not in my vision. I thought I would get hired as some, consultant or independent contractor or someone, which is how I've done much of my work throughout my life. That was the first time I had like full health insurance covered by an employer. That was the first time I ever had a 401k. That's the first time I ever like went to an office and sat at a desk, and like I did not like that, quite frankly. But for me, it was an opportunity again to taste something new in my career. At that time, I think I was about to turn 31, young pup. And for a lot of people, they think, I talk to 26-year-olds and they think they're fucking over the hill and what they're doing, they can't possibly change at that point. But for me at 31, it was like, all right, let me ride this ride. Let me taste this meal and see what is fun and what's not fun and what's scary. And if the stuff that's scary is that the resistance, and that's a good indication that I should lean into that. Or is it a sign that, oh, that's just not a good fit for me? All these different things. What tastes good, what doesn't? I know after working that job that there's a lot of it that I loved, and I'm looking for that more in newer projects or newer clients, etc. And there's plenty I did at Ring of Honor where I'm pretty sure, okay, I do not want to do those things. I don't want to take on those responsibilities or collaborate with these types of people in these types of ways, or have this type of work lifestyle. And like, again, there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of what works for us. That's all. So Neal, would you want to kind of tee up a few of these questions, and then we'll
there's a couple in the chat. I received one via a direct message. This is from Tony. I won't give his full name. He hasn't asked me not to, but I won't. Tony says, I hate my job to the level that I sometimes feel ill on Sunday nights. I don't get along with my coworkers very well, and I don't think my boss appreciates me, but I need to pay the bills. Any advice? And I thought about this myself. I am lucky enough to be in an organization where there are various different work streams and units and what have you. And I did have a spell in one of those. I really do. If anyone from my workplace is listening, I don't want to be too specific. But I will say that I could relate to a spell in my life where I, on a Sunday night, was dreading going into a particular office in the building on the Monday. What I would say is have a little moment of introspection and analyze your own situation. What is it that's really so bad about it? Is it your duties? Is it is it particular coworker? Is it customers if you're in a customer-facing job? Was there a time that you didn't hate it, that you, in fact, did you enjoyed it, and what was different then? So get a feel for what exactly is happening. The ultimate answer may well be leave that job, but as you've said in your question, you've got to pay the bills. So in the meantime, I would say, a bit of analysis, and then perhaps this is what worked for me. Have the tough conversation. I went to my boss, in fact, my boss's boss, head of business, to say, this is stressing me out. I am not cut out for this particular role within the organization. Here are my list of grievances. And here are some potential solutions where I think I could bring something to another area where there is a need. So these things may not apply to you, Tony, but talking to your manager and supervisor or their manager to tell them what's going on with you, and ideally to bring some ideas or solutions. And I would say try to shift your perspective. You're still developing skills and you're still adding to your CV. Ultimately, you may want to look for a new position, but if you've got to make that dough like we all do, then there are, I think, some things that you could try to adjust in the meantime. One other thing I would add is don't coast, though. Counterintuitive as it may seem, even if you don't enjoy your work, I feel like doing it really well is at least something that you can take home with you, that sort of sense of a job well done. And bringing your all to it. These aren't magical wand solutions for not enjoying your job. Ultimately, it may be that another job is the answer. But all of that depends on the size of your organization, what it is you do, all sorts of things. So I would say...
Sorry, I agree
please.
In the short term, Neil. Yeah, I agree in the short term of like, see if you can communicate and talk some of these things out. And maybe you have superiors that are very invested in wanting to make you feel a lot better about the job or the work. I guess what I'd have in response isn't necessarily like a short-term solution, but very rarely are short-term solutions, the most sustainable. But I work with a lot of people, and a big thing, especially with younger people, is like, I'm not sure because again, Neil, this person could leave the job, but then what's next? And a lot of people don't know what's next. So I would ask these 3 questions, and even like write this down on a piece of paper in 3 different columns. What do you like? What are you good at? And where's a need? So for instance, I like pro wrestling. Okay, what am I good at? Well, I'm not good at being a pro wrestler, but I'm good at like brand communications. Okay, where's there a need? All right, well, I spent a year plus figuring out how Ring of Honor had a need in certain ways in things related to branding and marketing and communications. And like, okay, that is just finding the connection points between those 3 things if I'm trying to make it as simplistic as possible. But again, like, becoming the linchpin, like, are you indispensable? Like, what makes, and I'm talking to just anyone in general right now.
Yeah.
What's your unique value in the world, whether to an organization or to a specific market or whatever it may be? Like, what is the thing that doesn't make you replaceable? What's the thing that does not make you average? For me, early on, it was that I used a drumming intervention successfully within a mental health context. So when I had my main gig for much of last decade, where I was working with a mental health practice, doing mostly group therapy in a drum circle format, my boss wasn't going to fire me and just replace me with someone else to do that. I was very comfortable knowing that. And so when the Ring of Honor opportunity opened up, I told the other employer that, hey, I have this opportunity. It's a full-time opportunity. In addition to the other independent businesses and projects that I have going on, I'm not going to be able to invest as much of my time into your business right now. And the response was the best response I could have gotten. It was, Jordan, we're so happy for you. We know how exciting this must be for you. You're welcome to do as much or as little work with us as you want. And whenever you want to do more work with us again, we'd be happy to have you back. And look, very lucky to have been in that situation, but I worked really hard, Neil, and I worked very intentionally to try to put myself in that situation where I was indispensable and I could not be replaced. And whether the service I offered, the way in which I provided it, my personality, the way I conducted business personally, with the people in the organization, I want to put myself in a position at all times where, like, I have that leverage. And that was really helpful for me with Ring of Honor too, because that gave me a lot of leverage, knowing that if they ever wanted to fire me, or if I ever wanted to leave, which eventually I did, I wouldn't be fucked. I could go back the very next day and make the same amount of income, if not more, given what Ring of Honor was able to offer, doing what I did before. So I didn't have to like quit a job in order to take on a full-time job. But if I was just an average therapist, that would not have been afforded to me, I don't believe. But again, when I was 20, I would not have been in that position because I needed a good decade to actually create vision and be consistent and show up in the world day after day, giving gifts and standing out and making connections and being remarkable.
Yeah. Tremendous. And I think that note about what am I good at? A lot of people will undersell themselves. Know your value, because what you're good at doesn't mean you got a first class honors degree or a string of, in my part of the world, A levels or whatever other qualifications. It's, it could be that you're a tremendous networker or a really good at logistics and organizing things. You're going to be better at more things than you probably give yourself credit for, because we're all conditioned still by this sort of school and academic system. And I think, yeah, there's a ton there. Another question, if we're okay to move on. Has your profession changed? This is from Aram, who's a frequenter of the Post Wrestling Discord. Aram who speaks, I think, 4 languages and is a tremendous presence in the Discord. Hey, Aram, we love you. He's from Sweden. No, from Denmark, works in Sweden, speaks German and English as well. So he's quite something. He wants to know, has your profession changed or been more intensive after the pandemic? For me, I talked about this a little during the show earlier on. You might have missed it, Aram. It's changed immensely because it's an office environment and we were sent home in 2020. And they've had to continue with that. Because the staff have pretty much demanded that they continue with it, and it's worked very well. So it's what a lot of businesses have moved to, a kind of hybrid system where you might be in the office 1 or 2 days a week, but largely people are working from home and being very productive. And that has been largely very welcomed by people. And if some people really love the office and want to get out of the house, they can be there 5 days a week if they want as well. So it had an enormous change mostly for the better. Not meaning any disrespect to the victims of the pandemic, by the way. And when I say that, I'm talking strictly about the changes it brought to our working environment.
Yeah, look, when I make the majority of my income gathering groups of human beings shoulder to shoulder with physical instruments in their hands, the pandemic fucked my shit up real good. And that switched to individual sessions versus, groups of people, obviously a big difference financially, per hour, and working with those people virtually. Eventually the practice, the one I was just talking about, it did not survive the first year of the pandemic. And that put me in a very interesting situation where I, again, had to think, well, what do I want now? What am I good at? What do I like? And where is there a need? How could I be of value in the world? So one of the things I did in response was start Beatwell coaching, right? Which essentially is how or why the wellness policy exists after a handful of conversations or sessions really between Wai and I. BeatWellCoaching.com if you want to see Wai and Neal's lovely testimonials and faces. So that was one thing. And then for me, I was deciding, okay, where do I want to go next in my career? Because again, there are many roads that I could choose to drive on. So it really came down to, do I want to go more into clinical psychotherapy? Do I want to get more into like traditional marketing, like for an agency of some kind? Or do I want to like more along the lines of Ring of Honor, stay in like entertainment and live events and marketing and communications, but more for the concert business? And I explored all 3. I talked to people that work in all 3. I literally just reached out to people. Some I hadn't talked to in 10 years. Some were an acquaintance at best. But again, I just reached out to people like, hey, here's where I'm at. Would you chat with me for 30 minutes? Then I just want to ask questions and bounce ideas off you. People are pretty generous. Maybe because I'm nice to them along the way or whatever it may be. But like, again, it's just asking. Like people, I think in general, are far more generous than we expect. And people are happy to help us maybe more than we expect, where we think we'd be a bother or a drain or a waste of their time. And so I really considered like, what do I want to do next? And I had opportunities within all three. And I decided for me at that time, I wanted to do clinical psychotherapy, but all telehealth. I realized I don't want to go to the same office every day. And I got a bit more intentional, actually a lot more intentional in who I want to work with. And right now I'm doing less drumming and much more traditional talk psychotherapy. And for me, it's a way to, again, taste it and see what I like about it, see what I don't like about it, and then I can proceed further from there. So the drumming stuff has come back. I had a very busy week last week with it. But yeah, it really forced me to literally like much of my stuff was blown up and then I had to figure it out. And it was hard and it was scary and perhaps it wasn't fair. But I dealt with it and now I feel much more confident and stronger and more prepared as I continue on the journey. And at least that's how I'm choosing to look at it. Anything else we got, Neil, before we...
Slight tangent, that looked like quite the time at the weekend. Looked like great fun, I must say. I wish I'd had the opportunity to be there.
All kinds of drum circle. Dude, I facilitate, I'm like, I'm culturally Jewish, but I don't really dabble in the religion per se. Yeah, it's midnight and I'm co-facilitating some Jewish ceremony like amongst a rabbi and a cantor in my post-wrestling t-shirt, drumming with dozens of people. Like literally, you can do anything. Yeah. I just want to say, you can do anything and get paid good. Like, I don't do that for $50, Neil. I get paid good money in the world in my post-wrestling t-shirt alongside a rabbi and dozens of strangers drumming. But I've worked hard to do that. But 12 years ago, when I came across this book, I at least had the belief of the potential that in the future I could be doing something like that and not just getting the job out of the list of job descriptions coming out of like a therapy program.
Absolutely. And someone with a hula hoop as well in silhouette in the background.
Custom made. Custom made. This guy makes his own hula hoops. Wow. God bless him.
Absolutely. One very quick question then, because we have run quite long today. Have you guys dealt with a toxic workplace before? And if so, how did you manage to be in it? That's from Aram again. I could just quickly say, not a toxic workplace. I've worked alongside people who I consider to be toxic, I guess, or that didn't get along with particularly well or were unfriendly, that kind of a thing. If that's toxicity, yes, it is, because the person I'm thinking of, I won't name names, would gossip and bad mouth other people a lot, that kind of thing. These things happen in office environments. I think it's one of the benefits of working from home. How I dealt with it was just to not engage with the person or people in question. Jordan, have you anything to add on toxic workplaces or toxicity?
You see my smirk? I'll be diplomatic and not use the adjective toxic. I will say not my cup of tea, perhaps. Got it. And in doing so, I go right to the source. I open my mouth. I communicate. I say, hey, I'm not liking this. And I'm not just complaining. I'm offering solutions, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been in a position where I've worked in an organization and I've said something to the effect of, our house is on fire. I think there's a better way to put it out and build an even more prosperous, better house for all of us and all involved and all that are enjoying this house. Let's talk it out. And then you see what happens. Sometimes people are happy being in denial. Sometimes people don't see your point of view. Sometimes people don't want to do the work. And in that case, then you have to ask yourself, or at least I would ask myself, okay, like what is here for me? And can or should I stay here to still get the things out of it in which I want? And if that's not the case, then okay, where am I going to go? Where else am I going to go where people will it will feel better, and like people will appreciate what I have to offer. I can't get mad at anyone not appreciating what I have to offer. That like, it's like I get rejected. I have a girlfriend and I'm very happy, but prior to that, like everyone else, I dated, and a lot of dates weren't into me, and like that's not my problem. That's just not a good fit. So okay, like let me go find someone else that's more interesting to date. And for me, it's no different than if you're in a toxic workplace or working with toxic people, perhaps. Again, I say that and I already hear the criticism of like, well, fuck you, Jordan. Like, I'm not in a position to just quit a job or to just tell my boss your house is on fire. I have empathy for that. But my point is that perhaps think a bit bigger picture and start doing the work that perhaps a book like Linchpin suggests to put yourself in a position in the future, maybe. Because again, doing this work, there is no map, there are no guarantees. But to me, that at least puts you in a better position of having a bit more, I don't know, choice or independence as you navigate your career trajectory than if you just keep doing what you're doing, especially if what you're doing is not enjoyable and not prosperous and like just doesn't feel good.
Agreed. Great advice from Jordan there. And I think that brings us to the end of the questioning.
Oh, I'm tired, Neil. That was a lot.
Feels like a long session, yeah. Hopefully valuable to those of you who are watching on YouTube or listening on your podcatcher of choice. Do visit postwrestling.com/Discord if you haven't already. And check it's for free, and you can check out the wellness policy zone in there. It's very welcoming, it's fun, and it's well kept in check by some great moderators. Shout out to, which I don't often do, I forget to do it, and I apologize, to Phil Chertalk, who the Lord of the Chord, as John Pollock calls him, who puts his blood, sweat, and tears. He's a linchpin into that Discord. He has invented little games, little wrestling battle games, all sorts of prediction games for wrestling matches, MMA matches, and so on. It's a tremendous little community. Do join us there, and the Wellness Policy channel is a great place to say whatever you like, and you'll generally get a sympathetic ear, even if you just want to vent. Before we go back to Dora, thinking about things to plug. If you're an Up Next patron, and there is a kind of a overlap between the Post Wrestling and Up Next fans, do check out Jordan. You'll get
not fuller, what you got today.
You'll get yes. You'll get perhaps a fuller representation of Jordan Goodman on the what would we call it, Jordan? The pilot episode of the Detox, perhaps, or a precursor to.
I don't know. I think the less formal with anything, the better with the project that Braden and I are doing. I don't know. It's if you want more irreverence and more dick jokes, I suppose. Braden and I had a 90-minute conversation yesterday on the Up Next Patreon feed. That was very fun, and we talked about the big stuff too. We talked about religion. Mm-hmm. We talked about death, but we also talked about how you pronounce Chad Kruger. Apparently, of Nickelback is the pronunciation. Mm-hmm. In addition to Dolphins and Doink the Clown.
Doink 2.0, yeah.
2.0,
if that,
yes.
He also buried me, and Way to a lesser degree. He made me cry.
I did, not Braden. Braden is a wonderful human being who would never do such a dirty, dastardly thing. But yes, I can also be a shit disturber. So
he certainly can, and do check it out if you have the opportunity. I have nothing else to plug, really. The Discord, you can follow me on Twitter if you like at Neal Flanagan, spelt the way it is on screen if you're watching, and in the show notes if you're listening. Jordan.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Wai. Thank you to those who have been with us for the past 2.5 hours live on Zoom. We appreciate all of you. And to anyone listening or watching this right now, like sincerely, I want to thank you. I don't get paid for this, and I don't intend to get paid for doing the wellness policy. I would never think to ask or anything like that. I genuinely think of this as a gift of me showing up in the world and trying to be operating in the spirit of generosity. Things have come as a result of that, and that's lovely. But again, that is certainly not my expectation. I've had people suggest to me, hey, why don't you promote beatwellcoaching.com on those episodes? And look, I've mentioned it a couple of times on this episode, and this may be the one and only podcast episode where I will say beatwellcoaching.com. But I don't sell intention.
Sorry, Jordan, to interrupt. What's that URL again?
That was Papa Roach on Snapchat.com. If you're interested. Thank you, Neil. I'm not interested in selling. Thank you. I don't want to sell. I want to show up and contribute and be of value. And it is incredibly meaningful and important and quite frankly, life affirming for me to find ways to do that specifically with the pro wrestling community. So that is where we'll leave it. Again, if you're offering the gift of your attention, it is not taken for granted, and we sincerely appreciate it. We will be back next month with episode 21 of the Wellness Policy. I believe Wai Ting will appear in full form at the top with video. Neil, I suppose, if he's willing, will join us as well. Certainly. And we hope you will too. So until next time, what does Wai usually say at the end? We know he says, and we're live to start it. But does he have a signature out?
I don't think so. I think he just says bye.
Okay, so I'm going to try that out. Bye.